But I'd love for you to share with the listeners when you're talking about kind of the physiologic things that go on with our bodies during that stress response. I think people associate, their heart rate may go up, their blood pressure goes up, they may get sweaty, they may feel anxious. It's the I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Your body goes into this mode where you're not going to stop to eat, you're not going to digest your food, you're not going to stop to have relations with your partner, you're very focused, very myopic. Talk us through some of those things, beyond what I've already mentioned, that actually occur that influence our ability to be able to focus, or not, for that matter.
Sure. Yeah, or really just the way that they change our focus, right? And the way they change these things from around us change the way that we can use our attention and use our resources. I think you talk about this a lot, this idea of scarcity mindset, and trying to avoid scarcity mindset. I think that's a really good way to think about it, because scarcity mindset means fight or flight. It means fight or flight or freeze response, high stress response system activity, high concern about survival, or managing threat in that moment. And we see that in the body when we measure people, and whether we do it or whether people have done it, for the last 50 or 60 years, we see that when people are in the scarcity mindset place, which we tell people never to be in, right? When we do negotiation practice or training or business training, we always say negotiate from a point of strength. That includes in your every moment of your life, right? We don't talk about it that way, but that's definitely important. And so when we're in that scarcity mindset, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our breathing rate gets faster, and our speed of our thoughts starts to go up. And so we start to have more negative, intrusive thoughts. We start to have racing thoughts, overwhelming thoughts. We start to sweat. And I think most importantly, for people to understand what's going on here, is the body is not that complicated. We're really just trying to balance threat and safety. The threat response is supposed to be active when we're running from a saber-toothed tiger or a lion, as you said, when there's a real survival threat, or when we're out of food, out of water, out of air, right? Those kinds of threats that are immediately resulting in a survival issue, those need to be dealt with the fight or flight system immediately to get us to safety. The reason why that system works that way is because when we are running from a tiger, or when we're falling asleep in our tent and there might be a threat like a bear or something outside or an enemy, we don't want to be able to fall asleep, right? We don't want to be able to worry. We don't want to worry about digesting our food or reproducing or being creative when we're trying to get out of a threatening situation. And so what happens is, in those situations of scarcity or threat, all the resources get diverted away to skeletal muscles, our heart, our motor cortex, and our brains to get us out of that situation, which is great. That's incredibly important for actually life-threatening experiences. The problem is that in our day-to-day lives, particularly in Western culture, we are not surrounded by actual survival threat on a regular basis. So what happens is our brains and our bodies have not been trained to interpret what is threat and what is actually not threat. And so we start to do what's called misappropriating threat. We start to interpret things that are threatening or that are not threatening as threatening, like emails, our kids screaming, traffic, work, right? All of these different things, responsibilities that we have, all of these things become potentially triggering of the threat response system. And so over time, on a moment-to-moment or daily basis, we are constantly diverting resources, or our body perceives that we should be diverting resources away from reproduction, away from creativity, away from our rest and digest and our immune system, which is, I think, very, very relevant right now, which is why we have so much immune dysfunction when we're stressed out. And we can measure this with heart rate variability, which many of your listeners may be aware of. Heart rate variability is the rate of change of our heartbeat over time, which over the last 25 years or so has become the most reliable biomarker of chronic stress. And so people who have low heart rate variability, that's a sign that those people are in a state of fight or flight or high stress most of the time, or they're not recovering well from their stress, meaning they're not sleeping well, or they're not getting good restful sleep, which is our best way to recover energy. And so those people are more likely to get sick. They're more likely to not recover when they get sick. And when they do get sick, they're more likely to die of that illness, which is fascinating, because this is the very first time that we've ever had a biomarker that we can track over time and actually use that to help us predict what people's outcomes will be like, but also whether our treatments are working, right? If our treatments are working well, we should be seeing a boost in HRV, which corresponds with improved outcomes and improved recovery. So now this is kind of shifting medicine because wearables are starting to become very, very powerful tools for helping us. And now in a society where people are not going in to see their doctors as often, wearables are going to be even more important than they were before.